Here's what the completed diagram might look like. Now, depending on the size of your organization, you might need a pretty big whiteboard to do this, but think of it as a multi-dimensional way to map the impact of the change throughout your entire organization. So let's walk through this step by step. So if we start with the delivery organization, imagine we have a number of teams that are delivering solutions to the customers. That's probably the easiest place to start because it should be relatively known what teams or projects are currently being worked on. So next you can group things into programs. Ideally, there are dependencies between teams. Well, I guess I shouldn't say ideally, but more than likely you've got dependencies between teams. And in larger organizations, there probably is a portfolio or a program construct where teams or projects are linked together. So you can map and identify those as well. And then add your customers on top of it. So who do these teams and programs serve? Are we talking about consumer business? Are we talking about business to business? Are we talking about internal stakeholders? Have a sense of who these teams and programs are delivering solutions to, and then link them. So now that you've got kind of a picture of what the delivery organization looks like, and again, I've worked in some organizations with 40, 50 teams, up to 200 teams, so you may choose to start with a specific division of your organization instead of the whole thing. And then what you want to do is start to add on what systems and applications do these teams work on? Which ones do they work on independently? Where do their dependencies lie? And you can map that simply by marking in one color or one symbol. In our case, it's blue here. So what team-owned applications do the teams have full control over? So that's where, if you look at Scrum, the notion of product owner works very well. You have one application, one team, one product owner can manage all of that work. So here, if you start to map on top any common systems that these teams touch. So in the green line, the customer data system, you can see only the program or the first two teams are requiring changes to that system, or they're needing to work with that specific team. And a service layer, the orange line, 3 teams are affected by that, and all 4 teams are integrating somehow with the mainframe billing system. So this is sort of mapping your existing organizational hierarchy, but from a systems perspective. So forget about what the management layers look like and what the team structure looks like at this point. Try and get a sense of what the teams are delivering to the market and how they're supported by the rest of the organization. Once you have that layered on top, odds are some teams have tighter dependencies than others. So start mapping what is their level of dependence on these back-end or downstream teams or upstream teams, however you choose to model this. So obviously H meaning high, so you can see team number 1 has very strong dependencies with the 3 back-end teams that are supporting them, whereas team number 4 has very low dependencies on the mainframe billing system. So that means that, sure, they might need to inject work into that mainframe billing system team, but not all that likely. They kind of get around having that problem by having a little more freedom in whatever their application is delivering to the market. When it comes to designing your new delivery organization, if you are looking to integrate some of those back-end functions, you can probably already tell just by looking at this diagram that if team number 1 has those tight dependencies, then a person from each of those 3 service teams may become core team members for team number 1, but not for team 3 or team 4. So you may have one person from each of those 3 back-end teams that support team number 2, 3, and 4. So this allows you to have a better conversation around what problem it is that you're trying to solve and how complex is the system that you're trying to change. Because the other challenge that we're going to run into here is each of those back-end teams, application teams, program, delivery organization, they're all going to have their own management layer. So in some cases, you may have multiple teams rolling up into the same director or the same VP. Sometimes it might be different. This is going to allow you to map out the complexity of that system, because you might find that you end up with team 1 has 8 people on it, but there's 45 people in this program because there's so many different layers of management and dependencies between the groups. This is a starting point for that conversation. So the next thing is to identify where are all the coordination points happening. So obviously the application team has to coordinate with each of the 3 backend teams. The 2 teams need to coordinate their work together. And there's going to be a little more complexity in all the different types of coordination that need to happen. But just to give you an idea about what your process is going to start to look like. So someone is going to need to funnel work into the program team. Someone is going to need to deal with the dependencies between the 3 backend teams. There's going to be coordination between team number 1 and team number 2. There's going to be fights over prioritization. There's going to be fights over funding. Once you start to map this out, it'll give you a clearer picture about how to approach this type of change. Ideally, you've got some people who are, in the case of Agile transformation, you've got early adopters in each of these groups that are sort of going to be the connectors or the bridges between all the different boxes on the existing org chart. So there's one important thing that we're missing, and obviously that is the business organization. So similar to how we mapped out the delivery organization, we'll start to put together what are all the different business groups that are involved. This is going to be contextual depending on your organization, but there's going to be centralized and core groups, and odds are on the business side and on the delivery side, there's PMOs, which adds another layer of complexity. So you've got another layer of coordination. So map out exactly what all those existing groups are and what the relationships are between them. So the next thing we can do is start to draw another type of dependency or, constraint that's on your delivery teams. So obviously some teams are going to have more compliance and more audit requirements than other teams. So you can indicate those by connecting them. And the thicker the line, the stronger the constraint or compliance is. So you can see sucks to be people who are on team number 1. Lots of dependencies, lots of legal requirements, lots of audit requirements, which means delivery is going to be slow no matter what you do. So trying to change that system of work, if you were just starting a transformation, you might want to avoid that like the plague and maybe focus on team number 4 or team number 3. But realize that if you're going to start with that program with team 1 and 2, then you are easily into a multi-year journey for some of these larger organizations. But visualizing this as a change facilitator helps to identify exactly how hard this change is going to be to the VPs or the people who are sponsoring the change. And also it's going to help you figure out how do we better sequence work between teams, where are we getting stuck, what type of problems do we have. The idea is to use this as a way to provoke a conversation. It's not to, as a change person, design a new system of work and push it down the organization's throat. It's to expose why this change is so difficult and allow the people who own those systems to figure out best how to coordinate the work between them. So you're also going to have coordination points with multiple business lines. So I've worked with some teams where they support 13 or 14 different lines of business. And this is where the idea of a centralized product owner falls down. So if team number 1 has a product owner who's responsible for their application, it's not possible they're going to be able to manage all of those red X's. It's extremely difficult in an enterprise setting to have one product owner. So you may use the notion of a product offering team, which is a lean concept, and it's basically you have a team of product owners at a portfolio level or at a program level. But there are going to be multiple coordination points that a solitary product owner simply can't handle. So this is an idea about how you can map this out, and it's best to map this out with the people who own these systems. As a practice effort, you may do this with your change team to get started with to help you make sense of the system. You can also visualize this on a wall. So I'm not able to show any pictures of actually doing this just due to privacy reasons with some organizations, but it works quite well because it really opens people's eyes up into how complex their system is. So you start to get away from talking about complexity and Cnaven and complex adaptive systems and models and tools and all the stuff that people in organizations don't really care about. They just want to know why it's so freaking hard to get work done. Once you can visualize this and put it on a wall, think of it as a 3D puzzle of your organization versus just looking at an org chart and how can you relabel roles and how can you restructure teams, because it's a lot more complex than that. Hope you enjoyed the video, so you can check out more at leanchange.org/resources.